So in this module here, we have 5 topics that we're going to talk about. First off, I need to make sure you're comfortable with what Azure AD Connect is all about and what's involved with it. So we're going to begin with that overview of Azure AD Connect. And then we're going to start looking at the preparation for the use of Azure AD Connect, which means we need to go to the on-prem AD environment and we need to do some house cleaning. And we're going to look at some tools that we have available for performing that house cleaning on-prem. We're going to look at setting up synchronization between non-routable domains. You may have an internal domain called .local, microtechpoint.local as an example. That's a non-routable domain. You're not going to be able to go out to DNS and find that domain name. So we're going to look at how we can work with those types of domains from your on-prem environments. We'll look at filtering the AD object synchronization process. I may have 70,000 users out there. 40,000 of those users are active, and the other 30,000 accounts are inactive. Maybe they're past employees. Maybe we don't want to synchronize our service accounts. So we'll look at filtering the objects that are being synchronized. And then lastly, we may have multiple forests in our Active Directory environment on-prem. How do we perform that synchronization with Azure AD Connect when we have a multi-forest environment? So those are the 5 areas that we're going to focus on within this module. First off, what is Azure AD Connect? It's a tool. It's a tool that has tools within the tool. And what it primarily does for us is integrates Active Directory on-prem with Azure AD. So you have to make sure you have a subscription with Microsoft Office 365 that contains or includes, if you will, the Azure AD interface. It's a tool to configure the synchronization and the sign-on between the 2 locations. This allows us to implement the use of the same login credentials. Now we have single sign-on. We're going to talk about that in the next module where we implement ADFS, the Active Directory Federation Services, but we also have same sign-on, which means now I get prompted for credentials when I'm on-prem and I get prompted for credentials when I'm in the cloud. I want to make sure those credentials are the same. I don't want my users to have to manage multiple authentication credentials, and this is where the Azure AD Connect comes in. Now, this replaces some of the older identity integration tools. If you're thinking, dude, I've never heard of Azure AD Connect, probably because it's a newer flavor of the old DirSync. And then after DirSync, it went to the Azure AD Sync. Finally, Microsoft created a tool called Azure AD Connect. Azure AD Connect contains the DirSync functionality or the Azure AD Sync, but it has a new name with some additional functionality included with it. Now, in order for you to use the Azure AD Connect, we have to have 3 things. We have to have an Office 365 subscription. That's no surprise, right? We then have to have an Azure AD environment in that subscription, and this allows us to perform that synchronization between the Active Directory on-prem and the Office 365 space. And then lastly, we need that on-prem domain controller running Active Directory. And the last 2 are the tools that are being used to perform that synchronization. Speaking of tools, what do we get when we install Azure AD Connect? Well, we've already talked about one piece of that, and that's the synchronization. How do we get that synchronization to occur? But how do we control the objects that are being synchronized between the 2 environments? So the synchronization tool that's part of Azure AD Connect is responsible for creating users, groups, and other objects. It's also responsible for making sure your identity information for your on-prem users and groups is matching with the users and groups that you have in the cloud. Now, the next one that we have that we're going to talk about in the next course, and that's the ADFS, the Active Directory Federation Services. It's optional, but we can use this to configure a hybrid environment using ADFS, the Active Directory Federation Services. This is a little bit more for the complex deployments. Maybe we have a domain join single sign-on. We have Active Directory sign-in policy enforcements, maybe even smart cards or third-party multi-factor authentication. This is the tool that provides that power in that functionality. So ADFS has been introduced to you in this course, but we have a separate course that focuses on the configuration of ADFS in your Office 365 environment. And the third tool that we have inside of the Azure AD Connect is health monitoring. And within health monitoring, This also has multiple tools, but just consider this a central repository or a central location to view the Azure Active Directory Connect health as well as the activity. And guess what? We have an entire course on that as well. But these are the three tools that are part of the Azure AD Connect, which is what really separates them from the old DirSync that only provided the synchronization. Now, just a little bit more about the health monitoring. A lot of people think that's going to just be a bunch of logs with a bunch of Excel spreadsheets in there. And I want to let you know it's actually a portal. You actually have a health portal. And in that portal, you're going to be able to keep an eye on what's happening with the Active Directory Federation services, what's happening with the synchronization between your on-prem and your cloud environment, what's happening with the Active Directory services, so with your domain controllers that are on-prem. So it keeps track of all of that. But in order for us to use this, we need to install what's called the health agent on the target servers, those that we want to monitor through this interface. So I just want to provide you a little enticement to be sure you check out my course on the Azure AD Connect health environment, so you don't just think, oh, I'm going to miss that or I'm going to blow by that because it's just a bunch of logs. It's really, really quite powerful.